So today we're going to be talking about something that I think, like several of the webinars in this learning journey, is going to be a subtle and nuanced reversal of frames, where there's a normal way of framing things and we're going to turn it around, going to reverse the logic. And as we reverse the logic, we'll get insights about why sometimes we don't get to where we need to be, why sometimes what we need to have arrive hasn't arrived, and why the notion of which direction things arrive from may be part of our misunderstanding. And so that'll all make more sense when we get into the actual presentation. But what I'd like to begin with today is that in the host team this week, we had a really powerful, almost like an unclarity about which of two directions to go, where we knew that we would need to bring clarity to the final two topics this week and next week, so that we could have a sense of closure for the learning journey. And there was a strong sense that what I'm going to talk about today would be the final topic, and that another topic that will be very close to, or maybe what we'll do next week, would be the topic for this week. And then just as we were getting to a place of near agreement on that, it reversed. And we felt that we needed to come into this topic first and then go to the other, and we would achieve greater clarity. And my sense of that is that what we're dealing with is so subtle, so fluid, and so formless that trying to give it shape is part of the challenge. Trying to give it a container of a narrative so that we can actually name it as a narrative is where the challenge is, because what we're doing in many ways is uncharted. I would say nearly every webinar in this learning journey is a topic I've never taught before. It's a topic that I'm gaining clarity about in my own life from moment to moment, and then passing it as quickly as I can on to all of you. And what I want to share before beginning today is that Tanya, who is here, Tanya and I were both part of 3 days of absolutely incredible change and transformation in our territory this week. We are living beings within a pro-social process of regenerating our territory right now. And you'll see some of that in the webinar today. And I want to try and give a sense of how did this happen and what is happening. And I mean, what is happening? Tanya was sharing comments to our WhatsApp group 5 minutes ago. Like right now, it's happening. And so that we can sense into what it means to be, what is our sense of being in this, is what we're going to be exploring. What is our sense of being in the emergence of territorial patterns that weave humans together in ways that are surprising to us, even though it's what we're trying to do. We try to do it and we're still surprised by it. And so with that in mind, I'd love to begin the presentation portion of our webinar today. And the topic is becoming the others. And recall, we've talked about what it means to belong, what it means to design our story of place, the art of being found. And this is sort of the opposite end of, if we can become findable, what if we become the one that is doing the finding? Or what if we become the one that makes the finding possible? And when I went and did a Google image search to try to find a visual representation of what we're talking about today, I found this image. What I love about this image right here is that you can see the metaphor of the sunshine creating something like the tree of life, the interbeing and the interconnectedness of all life in the world or in the universe, and that there are roots that are intermingling, and then growing from them, we have what look like autonomous beings, like individuals, except they're interwoven, and the I is shared between the two heads. What I find really powerful about this image is that when we are found, or when we find each other, in the moment of finding or being found, we become the other to someone, and they become the other to us. And in that moment, our universes collide and meld together into purpose and meaning. And it's a tapestry. It's a feeling of relating more than what the relationship is. In the moment it's happening, we often cannot describe who is the other to whom. And that's why this is such a delicate and subtle topic. But it's one we really need to understand to create the conditions for it. And it's interesting that this week we had a 3-day workshop on syntropic agroforestry. And the whole idea of syntropy is that there are patterns of cooperation that arise in the natural development of living beings, in this case, plants that become a forest. And their natural development, when they're placed side by side, creates an interwoven pattern of co-creation. And so we were designing that as a reforestation project this week. And today I want to talk about more of the human interpersonal version of it. So here's the key, is that as we become the others, we each are a mirror to the other. And notice how it goes both ways. I'm a mirror to you, you're a mirror to me, but then who is not the mirror? If one of us is the mirror, then one of us is the object that's reflected in the mirror. But what if both the object and the mirror are on both sides of the process? What if there are two eyes looking into the same space and seeing an eye looking back at them? How does that even work? Now, this is a place where a lot of mystics go. There's a lot of spiritual discussion. And what I actually want to do is try and be very practical and very concrete. I don't want to go into a place of New Age mysticism or transcendentalism or leave the world of the mundane behind. I want to go in the other direction. I want to come into the world of the mundane, the physical, the real, and see how this is happening, so that we can see how to be in relationship to it as a powerful way of creating regeneration. A few weeks ago, in The Art of Being Found, I created this graphic that said, you start out lost and in need of healing, but then you learn how to connect to your lostness and your confusion, and your pain inside begins to transform. And that allows you to relax and you become more open, which enables you to give love to the world, which also creates an open pathway for you to receive. And that's when you're surprised by getting found. What I want to talk about today is this. Who is in this position on the other side? When you get found, who is the other? And what if someone else is going through this process and it's not you? And you're the one that is the other to them. How does it feel to be someone else's other in the art of being found? So this is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to give some very concrete examples from my own life so that we can make this really as practical and realistic as possible. But before we do, I want to give you a conceptual metaphor, which is that learning to live regeneratively is a process of resonance between living beings. And just like how white light or full spectrum light can enter into a prism, and then the crystal structure of the prism can cause the different colors of light to be separated from each other, meaning all of those distinctions and that diversity was present, but it wasn't visible. But there can be ways that we can modulate and change the energy moving through us so that the energy that comes out the other side is felt differently. I call this a forward filter because it's not filtering what's left behind, it's filtering through and into what is becoming. And so when we begin to live as beings who are present to what's happening around us, we become a kind of concentration of energy and attention, and our actions become something that can be felt by others. And what we want to explore is, how do I change myself, or how do I open myself so that I am findable and feelable by others around me, so that those that I'm seeking to connect with, those who can meet my needs, those I can co-create with, we arrive together through the felt presence of each other, which is a lot of what happens here in Earth Regenerators. We find each other and discover a familiarity in our energy signatures. Like, you're someone who cares about the earth. You're someone who doesn't want to have an office job. You're someone who doesn't want to do something meaningless and pointless just to make money, or other kinds of energetic resonance between us. Well, how do we make that signal really easy to find so that we become the other to someone else who's alone. That's what we're going to talk about today. And here's my first concrete example. I took this picture the day before yesterday. These are two of my friends here in Barichara. Tanya knows them. And they are in the bioparque, in the place where I've been growing a food forest and where we started the Syntropic Agroforestry project. And what's amazing is that when these two people arrived to this line of dirt that we had all dug so that we could plant different kinds of seeds that will grow into a forest, what I want you to notice here is there are two people on each side of the line, and they're arriving to the same intention in the same moment. Each of them has a different history, a different identity, a different name, a different personality, yet somehow they came to this moment where they're both gathering the same seeds and planting them in the same place in order to grow the same forest. There's some collective purpose that brought them together. Now, what's interesting about these two people is they are not a couple. They're not married or dating. They are friends and they know each other. But I want you to notice two accidental synchronicities that they share. One is that each of them has a hat with a colorful band of beads with a very similar pattern on it. How is it that two people came to have the hats that represent something very similar, that look very similar, even though they came from different histories? And interestingly, something I find kind of funny is their names are almost identical. On the left is Gabriella, and on the right is Gabrielle, the female and male versions of the same name. That's totally an accident, just a fluke of the universe, like a cosmic joke that they have the same name, or they have the male and female version of the same name with similar looking hats. What's interesting about Gabriella and Gabrielle is that each of them cares a lot about healing, each of them cares a lot about nature, and each of them cares a lot about people. And in this moment, each of them is the other to each other. If one of them was to be asked, who were you planting those seeds with, they would name the other person. And so what I want to invite us into is, how does the flow of energy and intention lead to a sequence of actions where Gabriella and Gabrielle came to the same point in time and space to place the same seeds into the same project, in the same community, on the same part of the earth? What's interesting is they may not have known that they were looking for each other to serve in this task. They might both do gardening on their own, but not realize that they were missing out on the opportunity to do it in the community. Or maybe they did feel it. But what's important here is that the universe, in a sense, conspired to bring them together so that these funny little accidents, like their names being so similar, can be a joke to someone like me as I take their picture. So when we talk about becoming the other, I mean it in the sense that as Gabriella knelt down to put seeds in the ground, she was pulling seeds from the same bag that Gabrielle had in his hands. And in this moment, Gabrielle was the other to her, and they found each other in the shared action in this moment. It's in this way that we want to arrive at larger scale collective actions. No one designed it for the two of them to come together in this way. No one intended for these two people to be the people in this place, but there were intentions to create a project like this. And those intentions were felt in the field in a way that these two people ended up being the others to each other. And this is part of how we shape the field with our own intentions to create possibilities like this. I have the thing of getting my computer to move forward. There we go. What if you are who someone else has been looking for? What if you're the one they're looking for? Instead of you're feeling like you don't have your community, you don't know where your place is, maybe you should move from where you are, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you feel alone in what you're doing and you're trying to find community, so you're looking for someone else. But what if you are who someone else is looking for? Enter Jacob. This is Jacob with his thumbs up. He's a beautiful young man from Germany who arrived in Barichara a couple of months ago, volunteering at a glamping site called Guaymaro that's owned by my friends Jupe and Julia, which happens to be right beside Las Albercas, the future home of the Barichara Ecoversity. When Jacob learned that I was here, he actually knew who I was through Future Thinkers podcast, which is a funny way a lot of people find out about me. And we started talking. And then he started learning about the ecoversity. And it turns out he has had a desire for a couple of years to participate in creating an off-grid building that is net zero energy and net zero water that he would love to be involved in from the beginning to the end. And he has no experience with it. So how is he going to get involved in a project like that? And then one day he's glamping, where he's camping and volunteering at Guaymaro. And he overhears me talking to Julia about how I want her to be the architect that designs the Barichara Ecoversity, a campus that is net zero energy and net zero water that she's going to design from the very beginning, starting in the moment of that conversation in the land right next to where Jacob is camping. And all of a sudden, Jacob is really excited to tell me that I am the person he has been looking for. So here we are, two people arriving in the same place in the same time with the same intention, completely by accident, or so it would seem. How is it that I fit the pattern of exactly what Jacob was looking for, even though he had never said it and I didn't know it, and accidents of history brought us to the same place, that he was camping and volunteering in Julia's campsite. And he was standing within a hearing distance that he could hear me say this, and he came to me and asked if he could be involved. And now we're working on getting him a 2-year volunteer visa to stay in Barichara so he can assist Julia in the design and the construction of the Ecoversity campus. So somehow I became the person Jacob was looking for. So you see how mysterious this can seem? How was I open in a way? How was Julia open in a way? And how was Jacob open in a way that in that moment, we became the other for someone? That's the slippery question. That's sort of like you can almost feel how it happened, but then it's evasive and we don't quite know how it works. I want to tell you a bigger story, a powerful story, a story that's transformed my life, to begin to explore this further. And I want you to say hello to Camila, Vicky, and Don Jesus. Camila here on the left, Vicky with the red hair, and Don Jesus to her side. These are the 3 people who created the bioparking. Initially, it was Camila and Vicky who started this project. And then they recruited Don Jesus, who's sort of like the land manager, the groundskeeper. He does a lot of the day-to-day work and maintenance of the bioparque. And he's been there for almost the entire time. And I want to offer 2 what seem like simple questions. How did I find these 3 people? And how did they find me? How did I find Camila, Vicky, and Don Jesus? And how did they find me? How did it turn out that I became a steward of the bioparque with them? How is it even possible to weave us into the territory in this way? And I want to tell you this story so we can start to see how it works. See, the story of Bioparque Moncora, how it came into being, is a story of people walking the path of regeneration who became the others. They became the others for me. And their story looks something like this. In 2009, Camila and Vicky began the lonely walk. Vicky separated from her husband and moved to Barichara, where she had never lived and where she had no family and no connections, because something about the land drew her here. And she retreated into her garden. Camila, whose husband was an active figure in the community and a member of the association that owns what became the bioparque, she was accompanying her husband as he proposed that the way to resolve a conflict about the use of this very important land was to abandon the idea of building 60 houses to rent and sell, and instead create a community forest. And Camila, accompanying her husband, who was someone who knew about reforestation, was very excited to be involved because she loves nature. And Vicky, who became Camila's friend, joined the project. But then Camila's husband promptly became sick and he passed away. And that's how Camila and Vicky started the Lonely Walk in 2009. For 5 years, imagine 2 women in their 60s for 5 years going to barren land that had been degraded from decades of extraction and exploitation, full of dry, hard-packed clay and rocks, and they began planting trees, most of which died. And as they planted these trees, they received no support from the community. The association and all the members who collectively owned the bioparque did not care about what they were doing, did not want to know what they were doing, and gave them absolutely no support. So for 5 years, Camila and Vicky walked up to this barren land, planted trees, and most of them died. And they walked this lonely path for 5 years without the others to help them. Then one of the school superintendents and a couple of teachers came to them, inspired to see the beginning of trees growing, and asked if they could bring the high schoolers. And for about 5 years, they had high school students coming and doing projects, and a lot of the infrastructure of the bioparque was built. Some of the shelters, some of the buildings, some of the ponds, some of the bigger projects were done with the youth, because the youth had found elders who inspired them in the form of Camila, Vicky, and Don Jesus, who had joined them by this time. And Camila and Vicky had found the others in the leaders at the school who brought the children, who brought the teenagers. But then there was a political conflict between the school superintendent and a member of the mayor's office, which, this is Latin America, the mayor's office basically functions like a corrupt local mafia. And so they were forbidden to allow the children to come anymore, and the kids from the school stopped coming. And that's when the bioparque became a lonely walk again for 2 or 3 years. And that's when the arrival happened. First, of my friends Felipe and Alejandra, and I'll tell their story in a moment. And then of Jessica, Elise, and me, as we were drawn in by them with the amazing story of there were these others. There were these 2 old women, now in their 70s, who had been building the bioparque almost entirely by themselves, and they were looking for young people to take it over and continue it when they're gone. And we arrived to find them as the others for us. And as we arrived, we became the others for them. And this grew to what happened this week, an absolutely transformational moment that we are sitting in the middle of right now, which was the gathering of the found. As we found each other, we began to gather each other. Amazingly, this started with me, an outsider from the United States who's only been here for 2.5 years. I had been here for 1 year. Imagine, my Spanish was pretty lousy then. I barely communicated. And somehow, because of Earth Regenerators, I was able to bring money to the table. We formed an advisory council for a Barichara Regeneration Fund, and we began weaving together isolated regenerative projects on the territory until we were able to articulate the idea of an ecoversity, which connected some neighbors, especially a woman named Manuela, who had connected with another person, Paco, that wants to teach syntropic agroforestry. And we had a small team of us form in the last month, and we organized to have a workshop for 3 days where we would create a food forest as a community learning process in the bioparque. And now the bioparque is coming alive as a place in which the weaving of the entire territory occurs. And all of us who are finding each other this week gathered to crystallize our capacities. And as of yesterday, we gave birth to a new ability to transform the territory. And what I want you to see in this diagram is that none of us can see the lonely walk. Most of us in the gathering of the found were not here when the youth were here from the high school. We arrived after they left. Our arrival was after the community engagement stopped. And yet somehow we found each other through the beautiful signal and beacon that was the bioparque, and the way that Camila, Vicky, and Don Jesus stewarded and held its purpose for the entire territory for all of these years. And that led to this. There's Tanya sitting there on the ground. You can see her black boots if you look at her in the middle of the scene. She's sitting in front of Paco. This is a picture I took on Thursday morning. Over to the right, kind of partially obscured by the branches, is my friend Felipe with a hat on and a white shirt. Felipe is the one who brought me here, and I'll tell his story in a moment. You see this big sheet of paper, and the paper is hanging down. Just to the left, the paper is partially covering the face of my friend Margarita, who has been weaving the territory and gathering people together for about 7 years now. What I want you to know about this picture is that this picture, which was taken on Thursday morning in the Bioparque, where I have been growing a food forest as my own solitary healing process while going through a separation with Jessica and transforming my relationship to land, so that eventually we would create community food forests. That actually began at the moment this photo was taken. We gathered and sat together on Thursday morning to plant a centropic agroforestry system on an entire acre of land, 1/4 of a hectare, in the span of 2 days. If you can imagine, I'll show you a picture of it soon, that the gathering of the found is embodied in this photograph. There are campesinos, there are wealthy people from the outside, there are people like Tanya and me who aren't even from Colombia, who arrived here. And all of us came to this moment of becoming the others to each other to catalyze the transformation of our entire bioregion, which is what is beginning to happen on this piece of land. So the question I want to ask us is, how did Camila and Vicky become the others to me so that I could find them and bring my family to Barichara? How did my arrival and the strange way I showed up in the community enable me to transform the Bioparque in ways that Camila and Vicky and Don Jesus were never able to do, so that this group could arrive here for this transformational moment? And what does it mean that some of us with multiple languages and different landscapes in our histories are even here on this call right now on this webinar, who also participated physically in this event? How does this weaving happen? How did it occur? How did we become the others to each other? And what I want you to see in these images right here is that in the 2 days of Thursday and Friday, with the guidance of Paco, who's a really good teacher and a practitioner of centropic agroforestry, we were able to organize ourselves into small teams and do an incredible amount of work. Starting with nopal, which is a type of cactus, and planting it as a deposit of water so that we can grow an agroforestry system without having to irrigate. We have people here like Lynn, is the woman in the middle with those amazing arms, her big muscles. She's actually from Colorado, and she's visiting here in Barichara. She's from the US, and her Spanish isn't very good, but she got right in there and was working with the campesino men, digging these trenches, swinging a pickaxe. And here on the right, we have permaculture practitioners and campesino farmers planting together in the spirit of territorial regeneration. Because the thing you need to know is that we selected the plants as much as possible to represent native species of the ecosystem of the tropical dry forest where we are. So we're weaving people, landscape, and the rest of nature. And somehow we all found each other. And here are just a few more photos to see how happy we are, how harmonious we are, how we're like a super organism, like a colony of ants, all working in an orchestrated manner to achieve this immense purpose. Many of us have never planted before. Some of us have very little experience with gardening or reforestation, and yet somehow we did all of this amazing work. How is it that each one of us could be so motivated by the presence of all of the others that we could show up to a group of 30 people who the others is all of them, and then additionally everyone who couldn't be there because we organized this event so quickly? And that's how we created all of this. It may be hard to appreciate how much has been done, but this photograph almost captures the entire size of what we planted in 2 days. All of these lines going from the upper left to the lower right, including the lines of sticks and the lines of dirt. We have filled this entire area with a stacked system, together planting something like 5,000 seeds and about 1,000 baby trees and bushes in cactus. Can you imagine? 5,000 seeds and 1,000 plants all in the span of 2 days, done by 30 people with a model that we can replicate on anyone's land in the territory. And many of us, having our own land to work on, are about to start imitating this. And one of us, Manuela, actually created one of these lines on her own farm this morning. So this is already replicating in the territory less than 24 hours after completing it. And this is a living laboratory of syntropic agroforestry, a learning center embodied as a forest, held together by a web of human relationships. Each is a member of the other to the others. It's hard to express how important this event has been. And what I want to say is that we became the others to each other in a way that's so powerful that we can feel the momentum, that we can save the native forest of this region, that we can transform the regional economy, and that we can bring the waterfalls and dead rivers back to life with activities like what we did in the last 3 days. Because we're not alone, we're together. And we're not only together, we are an orchestra, a performance of beauty, a regenerative system of human relationships capable of doing something like this in 2 days. Just imagine, after we're more skilled, what we can do in 2 years. So this idea of becoming the others, how do we open ourselves to be found? How does our energy open others to find us? How is it that Jacob found me? How is it that Tanya, again in this photo, how that she and I found each other? How is it that Manuela found Paco, the teacher, who's this man in the black long sleeves? He was the one who was our teacher today. How did all of this happen? How can we each do it in our own bioregions? How do we become findable to each other? It works like this. You start out by cultivating yourself like this little green circle. Become a kernel of life, like a seed in the soil. Feel into yourself to feel what makes you come alive. And then from that feeling, go into the pink circle, or the salmon-colored circle, which is restore your heart connection to that. What is it that makes you feel alive, and why is there love there? And just start to make that love visible. Make it something you express. Make it something you don't hold in. Just by feeling that love, you're going to begin to shine. You're going to just shine with your love and the beauty of your life and your aliveness. And don't worry, when you begin to shine, the others are going to find you. And just by doing that, you will attract the others. The way you become the other is to connect into what makes you feel most alive. Connect yourself to it. Let yourself love it. Let yourself love what brings you alive. I love to dance. My body is the body of a dancer. I need to allow myself to love dancing. So what did I do? I started a daily stretch routine, which became the foundation of my regenerative practice. And as people feel my physical energy, as they're in my relaxed presence, or if they get the chance to see me dance, they see me shine. And the other dancers are drawn to me. The same thing happens for those of us who want to bring forests back to life, which is how Gabriella and Gabrielle found each other, is they both wanted to bring the forest back to life. And by shining that love, that kernel of life that made them feel alive, they attracted the others to them. So the thing I want you to notice here is don't seek the others. Make yourself findable and stay where you're most alive with the energy shining from you so that you're findable by someone who's seeking it. And that's how you will become the other. Now I want to tell you about Felipe, because he's the reason I'm in Barichara. And I think a lot of us can agree it's a good thing that I'm in Barichara. Lots of beautiful things are happening. So I want you to know a little bit of Felipe's story. I'm not going to tell you all of it, but I want to tell you that Felipe's first time in Barichara, about 10 years ago, he was backpacking solo across Colombia. He's from Colombia, he's from Bogota. And as he's backpacking solo across Colombia, he planned to stay in Barichara for 2 days. And as he's hiking through, this guy named Sebastian passes by on a motorcycle and they start chatting. And within moments, they talk about permaculture. Sebastian invites Felipe to get on his motorcycle to drive back to his house, which is the house of Gabriela, who we saw in that photo next to Gabrielle. Sebastian is Gabriella's son. And Felipe was planning to stay there for 2 days. But you know what? He stayed there for 2 years, helping them on their land to do landscape restoration and ecological restoration work. Felipe is naturally a healer and naturally an organizer and naturally a builder of peace. He's a beautiful human being. And he felt such a deep connection to Barichara that years later, when his wife Alejandra and he started having children, they came back to Barichara because of the Bioparque, as a place where their children could become part of an Escuela del Bosque, a forest school. And when I met Felipe 3 years ago, he told me that they wanted to create a forest school in the Bioparque. And he told me about Camila and Vicky. And he told me about this community forest. And he told me about placing the children in the center of it. And I told Jessica. And Jessica and I had a call with Felipe and Alejandra. And then we brought Elise to Barichara. Camila and Vicky and Gabriela and Sebastian brought Felipe. Felipe brought his family. Felipe and his family brought me and then my family. And then me and my family coming allowed me to become integrated into the story of the Bioparque through all that's happened in the last 2.5 years, so that I could be one of the catalyzing factors of what happened this week in this amazing workshop. So I want you to see how Felipe was the other that I found. Camila and Vicky were the next others that I found. The parents that came to the forest school that Felipe and Alejandra organized were the other parents that we wanted to raise our kids with. And their kids were the others that our daughter wants to be friends with. And we began finding each other because what makes us feel alive opened us up to our heart connection of what we love. And that made it visible. I could see Felipe's love for his children and his love for nature. And that drew me to him. He was shining. And that's what brought us to Barichara. Felipe was my other in that moment. I'm so grateful for it. Felipe is a dear friend. And I'm so happy my daughter gets to grow up playing with his children. So the question here is, what happens when we start to heal whatever has kept us from feeling that connection to our aliveness? What happens inside of us that makes it possible for us to connect and hold our heart connection to what brings us alive so that it flows out of us and becomes findable? How does that work? That's what I want to tell you, the story of Don Jesus. I took this photo yesterday. This is a precious moment for me because some of you will recognize this location. This is my sanctuary. This is the food forest that I've been building solitary with a little bit of help here and there for the last year. And Don Jesus came over to see the agroforestry work, which is what's happening with that black little roof, that tarp behind us, where everyone's planting the agroforestry system in the background. And Don Jesus and I came over here. And I want you to notice that Don Jesus is one of those people. He's so gentle and so quiet. You could go your entire life and never know he exists. He's the embodiment of the meek, of the humble, of the people who just give love and never ask anything in return. Most people have no idea that he has been quietly maintaining the Bioparque for 10 years. And here he got to arrive to this agroforestry workshop with 30 people converting a huge piece of land, doing work that transforms and extends everything he's done by himself with the help of Camila and Vicky for 10 years. What I want you to ask, or I want you to focus on, is how the humility and the love and the devotion of someone like Don Jesus made it possible to heal someone like me. That I could begin to talk with him. I love making jokes to make him laugh because he spends a lot of time in solitude and he's really happy when he has someone that he can just be quiet with together. He is someone who just naturally will heal you if you're around him. So what happens when we start to heal? We feel the delicate and subtle nature of other people's love. I began to see and appreciate the way that Don Jesus has been loving his entire territory. He's a man of this region. He's from this place. He's connected to the indigenous people here, and he's been quietly giving his love to the land without asking anything in return. And when I calmed down enough inside myself, I could feel it in him. And that's what enabled me to bring this glorious gift to him of helping catalyze this transformational experience, that I know how important it is to him because he's become my friend. This way of relating to each other and finding each other is so deeply human and so natural, and yet so invisible unless we slow down and find the stillness in ourselves to recognize it in each other. And when Don Jesus stood here, you can't see it in this picture, but we were surrounded in a dance of butterflies from all the flowers in the bushes. And those bushes are only there because of the work I've been doing in the last year. And we were held in the presence of fluttering butterflies as I felt him overwhelming, just overflowing with love, that all of these people were here. They were all the others to him, and he didn't say a word. The people in the workshop don't need to know the story of Don Jesus to know that he's the others, that he has been found within. Because in his quiet way, he doesn't ask for that connection. He just stood in the presence of everyone, watching us with amazement at how much the community was gathering around the thing he loves most, his devotion to this place. And he was surrounded by the others in that moment, even though all the others didn't even know who he is or his importance. And it didn't matter. All that matters was that he could feel his connection to everyone else. And my healing was enhanced in this moment as I felt him heal. I want to connect this back to our learning journeys in Earth Regenerators, because the logic of the learning journeys goes something like this. Those of us who understand the plight of the world, those of us who are what I call collapse aware, who get that the world is so messed up and so scary and so dangerous that we actually become socially isolated and alone. And we're trying to find where we belong. Thus, we enter into the space as the lonely in many ways, where we need to find each other. But then as we start to feel this heart connection in what brings each of us alive, we start to feel belonging, and that's how we get found. But by getting found and becoming conscious this is what's happening, we can choose to become the finders, which is we can choose to be the people who find someone else who's in the process of becoming findable. So the logic of the learning journeys is that each of us here is both the finder and the found. And in the process of seeking each other, we become findable by those of us who are already here or have done our internal work somewhere else, our internal healing work somewhere else, that we're able to find each other. And notice how this becomes a spiral, how it grows outward, so that you can imagine the circle of be the finder becomes a circle of like arms circling around to make a hug of the next round of the lonely who arrive. And the logic of our learning journeys is that they'll continue, and there will be another one that starts in June, then another one in October, then another one in December. 4 times a year, we're going to repeat this logic, that those of us who become findable by entering into a space where we can open up and feel belonging, and then realize how important it is so we become finders of others who are seeking to be found. And this process will continue and deepen and grow till more and more of us are regenerators of the earth. That's the logic of the learning journeys. And that's how this ecoversity began. That's how the bioparque became a center of syntropic agroforestry this week. That's how we're weaving a tapestry of relationships at the landscape scale. And I just wanted you to see this picture to show you that there's something very deceptive in saying the Barichara ecoversity is a piece of land, because that's actually not true. The Barichara ecoversity is the web of relationships of people who have found each other, spread as a human ecosystem across the entire territory. But for those who don't know that yet, we tell them a story that's not entirely untrue, which is that we're creating a campus for the ecoversity on this piece of land. But what's important is, just as the Syntropic Agroforestry Project is a school because of the people learning together, this land is a school because of the people learning together across the landscape. So becoming findable to each other is still the approach to how we build the ecoversity. We find each other like the way that Jacob found me and Julia to be involved in creating an off-grid campus. We become findable to each other in the shared purpose of bringing rivers back to life, restoring the forest, restoring health to the planet, finding community, raising our children well, and all of these things that we need to do. And it grows to the territorial scale. So you can see that what we're talking about now, while it might feel like an individual thing, how do I become the person who finds others? But it's actually the pattern, the logic of the pattern for how we create territorial scale regeneration. And we do it by healing enough within ourselves to connect to what brings us alive, and we make that visible and touchable so others are drawn to us. I wanted you to see the sketch. I made this drawing last year in December. The square is the piece of land that Centropic Agroforestry workshop was done on. Rio de Sueños is just Spanish for River of Dreams. These are the little ponds that I've been digging in a sequence with other people helping to create a water retention system and a backbone of reforestation across this 1 hectare piece of land. Well, it turns out in the left of this photo is where 30 people gathered this week and claimed about 40% of this land to create that project. So the question is, how might I be your other? And how might you be mine? So when I started quietly creating this bosque comestible, which is just Spanish for food forest or edible forest, as I started creating a food forest in my own healing process, I became the other to everyone who arrived in that workshop this week, because I was the steward of this particular piece of space. It was already set aside to create demonstrations of food forest for the entire community. So it was the perfect location for this workshop. I became the other to all the people who came to the workshop. But everyone who came to the workshop, I had been doing this alone, wanting the community to arrive. And they arrived through Paco, a teacher that I didn't even know, organized by Manuela, who lives down below and not in the bioparque. All of them were the others for me. So the question here is, if I might be the other for you, and you might be the other for me, who is the we that's behind it all? In this case, it's in this photograph. The we is the land itself dreaming a territorial dream of restoring rivers and native forests in a way that integrates humans into a regenerative economy. A food forest is a regenerative economic system based on the local ecology of the native forest that absolutely needs the circulation of water and rivers for it to function. And it was the land itself who was the container for me and the people of the workshop to arrive together in this place. The we was the dreaming of the land. The we was the collective intention and the collective pain that brought us together. And that leads us to the big insight that this doesn't just work on 1 hectare of land. There's also the great other, which is that this living presence that's alive inside each of us that enables us to shine, that we can also feel in non-living beings and in the land itself, applies to the entire planet. So if you want to amplify the energy in yourself, as you feel into that kernel of your own aliveness and connect your heart to it, anywhere you are on Earth, you will be in a living tapestry of the Earth's biosphere. There is a great other, often called the great mother, this intelligent, sentient being, this living planet that you're a part of. And by making yourself findable, that living presence, that sentience, that planetary intelligence will send other humans to you to help you be the one that finds them, and to help them be the one that finds you. And that's how I want to end today, the presentation portion of our discussion. So I want to open up how subtle all of this is, how easy it is to not see it, how hard it is to get the framing right, because the framing is multidimensional and multidirectional. And the intelligence behind it is distributed in a way that causation is multiple. And so there are many causes and many directions, and there are moments of convergence, like on Thursday morning, when 30 of us converged to create a 1-acre food forest, which we built in 2 days. And now, and Tanya could speak to it if she likes, we're feeling this presence of intense potential. It's kind of overwhelming. Like, what do we do first? We have a million things we could do from here. We've all found each other. So we're already designing the next workshop and where it might be, already raised some of the money to do it so we could just enact it. We have 30 people who are already a community of practice, having built the first one. So what I want to stress here is that becoming the other is something we prepare in ourselves, like the way a garden bed is prepared for a seed to fall into it. And if you flexibly go back and forth between the two directions of causation, the two perspectives, gently go back and forth. Be findable, be found, be findable, be found. Be the finder, be the one finding. Be the finder, be the one who gets found. So you gently go back and forth in a relaxed way, you'll start to understand it. You start to feel it, and then it'll become clear how to be it. Tanya, please.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can listen to me.
Sí, te escucho.
Okay, perfecto. Well, it's been quite a month, actually, a month and a half of organizing this course. Along with Joe, Ceci, my partner, and Natalia, Yvonne, Margarita, Manuela, Germán, who is other really great man in the region. We really had like a long process to just get to know all the needs that Joe was planting here. And it's amazing how it all connected. Amazing how we came together along with Paco, with this guy that resulted Colombian, living in Brazil, and how it all, ¿cómo dices tejer?
Weaved
together in syntropy, which turned to be a really perfect term for connecting with nature, for making sense of all this community work that we are doing to just give back to Earth a little bit of what we take from her in our own ways, because we all have different ways of doing this. And it's amazing how we all gathered here. We agreed on the intensity of these days, and I was talking to Joe this morning. I told him, Joe, I feel really tired. I really feel like tired, but in a way, like energized and happy and eager to continue these processes here. And there were many people that couldn't participate because there were like more than 30, and I don't know if it's possible, like physically, pedagogically possible to do that. It was the first workshop of Paco. He later told us, and such a sweet guy. And for me, it was also this what you mentioned, Joe, that learning how to shine and learning how to connect to your own heart, and that's a way to just open yourself to the universe, and the tribe will come. That is, like you said, you don't have to worry about it. It will happen. But I have found myself like in this need of, yes, opening myself, but also being very, very focused on not distracting myself with things that are not really contributing to this path that I'm here to follow. And this can be tricky. I know that Joe is very organized and he learns how to just manage his time. But for me, it's like I have to really be focused on what is really contributing to this path that I really want to just came here to share. And it has to do with veganism and this sense of knowing that this contributes to syntropy, that this contributes to community, and this contributes to health and the health of the earth as well. So it has been amazing. And thank you. Thanks to all the people that make this possible, including Felipe, Camila, Vicky, and you, and many people that gather, and more that are going to come. So thank you.
Gracias, mi hermanita.
Mi hermano.
Yeah, that I'm so glad you've spoken, Tanya, because this feeling of focus, of finding what is in your heart that is the place where your heart comes alive. That's our work. Like if you had a homework assignment from this, it's how do you find what brings you alive in your heart? That's your homework assignment. If you want to have one, like that's it. And I know in Tanya's case, it's feeling such compassion for life and wanting to protect it when it's being harmed. There's such a clear focus in that. And in each of us, there's something. And so I want to just invite that that way of being into our worlds. Claire, please.
Thank you. And I am so grateful for the way that you told the story, because you're just grateful. But also, you know, I sit on a municipal advisory committee, and I keep trying, and it's the focus of the committee is healthy communities. And I keep trying to bring in stories or bring in sort of challenges to how we're doing things. And I know that people are wanting to do the right thing. They're an amazing group of people that I'm working with. But the way that you've told the story really helps to kind of create that new pathway so people can imagine into like what you were saying with this is the sort of story of, you know, showing the piece of land of the ecoversity. And it's kind of a way of leading people in, because they just can't, it's very hard to try and tell this story to even be the hook that brings people into this other way of seeing. So I think that's all that I really wanted to say was thank you, and just how hard it is to try and find ways to tell the story until people are doing this and you're connecting those dots to, and the synchronicities. How do we, I mean, just so often it's the thing that's ridiculed when you bring in, and oh, well, you know, we can put you into that camp, you're easy to dismiss. So thank you.
Yeah, one thing I'll say quickly on that before passing it to Stephen is that the idea of the ecoversity is so subtle that in the beginning of January, when I asked Margarita and her husband's permission to raise money for them to turn her house into a learning center, because it was almost a learning center, she didn't understand what the ecoversity was. And she had been doing it for 6 years. And so I had to help her see that what she was doing had value. And then she had to spend about 3 months doing it with me, just gently every couple of weeks, sitting down with her and saying, this is what you're doing and it's beautiful. Keep at it, you're amazing. Everyone who knows Margarita gives her hugs because she's amazing. And it took her about 3 months, even after receiving the money to turn her house into a learning center. And the first day of this workshop, this entropy workshop, we had the classroom part in her house. And she told everyone, it's no longer a dream, it's a reality. Because her house was literally the learning center, was literally the ecoversity in that moment. And she understood what it meant to weave the tapestry of the territory, that's what it is to be the ecoversity. And so that's how subtle this is. She has embodied it for years and still couldn't see it until someone else mirrored it back to each other. I had to mirror her for her to see her. And then other people re-mirrored it. And because part of her power is her humility. So her inability to see herself was part of how she was doing it. So just to show how subtle that can be. So thank you for that, Claire. Stephen, on to you.
Thank you, Joe. I'm so overwhelmed with emotion right now. I don't know what else I could say. I've spent my whole life looking for the others and trying to be found. And it's always the wrong others. So your story of the lonely journey hit home very painfully. And then the fear of, well, this is just going to be another disappointment. I know it. Nothing to fix, just the space I'm going through. Don't know that I'll make it on the community calls because my old life still takes up some of my time, and I'm working the next 2 days and I don't know exact schedule yet. So I wanted to come on here and at least make some public visibility, because otherwise I just go hide somewhere and be by myself. So thanks.
Stephen, I've been holding you these last few days, feeling this thread of our connection about what we're doing here. So just know that you're held.
Yeah, I guess my biggest fear is that I won't get there. And I think there is Barichara, wherever there ends up being.
Stay in the journey. We'll stay in the journey.
Thanks.
On to Midi, please.
Well, first of all, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on and just being here. You have become so much a part of my heart in the time that I've known you. And I have no doubt that your lonely path is going to come to an end. Absolutely no doubt at all. I have no idea where it's going to come to an end and when and with whom, but I know it's going to come to an end. And such big blessings for you just to be with us today, especially if you've got a busy weekend. Oh, Joe, this for me is the webinar, to beat all webinars. This is a piece that is so beautifully brought together. So many things for me. It's where the recognition of community in the land comes together in the story for me. It isn't community or land, it's community in the land, and that's exquisite. I want to really thank Tanya. Tanya, you speak to focus, and I've only relatively recently, I've been one who's had to deal with the shadow of distraction in my core. I've been like a butterfly, no, more like a dragonfly, flying from place to place. And it's really been, and I guess that's why Stephen's story touches me so much, because so much of it has been lonely, but it's always been following my heart. And since I got this really clear focus about what my life is all about, it helps so much because you shine, Tanya. I said it in the chat, you're a shining one. And the thing about becoming a shining one is that you attract so many people to the shine. And for me, that's where it becomes so crucial to know what my focus is, because I know I'm a shiner too. And so many come to me, and it's almost necessary to feel my boundaries to be almost Teflon coated, to know, yes, I'm hearing your story, but yours isn't my story. And yes, I'm hearing your expressed need, but I'm not the one to feed your expressed need. So I speak to this focus. I'm really clear, and it's partly thanks to Joe. What is my North Star? My North Star is to do everything I can to ensure that my granddaughter can thrive, can have a life and can thrive. And so every day I ask myself now, is what I've done yesterday helping to make the world in which my granddaughter can thrive? And if it isn't, then I know that I need to become even more focused in who and how and where and what I'm in my space. So thank you all. This is just magical. Thank you.
Mitty, you just like, every time you speak, I feel like washed in the warm coating of the sunshine or something. It just, I always love it. So thank you so much. Gail, on to you.
Yeah, there's so much I resonate with from today, from your stories. As you know, Joe, I also experienced some synchronicity in my life. For those who don't know me, I'm co-director of a nonprofit called One Earth Conservation, and we do parrot conservation work in Latin America. And my other is a woman named Laura Conjoiner, who I met by accident at a nonviolent communication workshop that she was facilitating in 2014. And I started volunteering with her, and together we created One Earth unofficially in 2015, and it's grown immensely ever since. And the interesting thing about it is right now we work with local people, a lot of whom are indigenous. We have a project in Honduras that looks like it might explode soon. We're applying for some major funding. I just submitted a grant proposal this morning to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they funded us before, to expand a really large project there, even to make it even bigger. So it's very exciting. If we get the money, I'll tell you more. On the other side, though, is I live in New York City, in a suburban neighborhood of New York City. So part of me is very full and full of company, and certainly being in Earth Regenerators. Also, almost in August will be 2 years. I have found my others here as well, but I'm missing my others still in New York City. I've tried to find them through the years. I've been involved with Sierra Club and the Climate Reality Project and this and that, and it just didn't connect. And as some of you also know, I'm trying to do a native plant like pollinator garden in my backyard now, and I'm still feeling so alone with that. I'm going to be paying somebody, but I don't have enough money to pay him everything he needs, but I'm going to do it little bits and pieces. But I so would love community here to work with in the city. So I'm in this mixed place. Like I very much resonated with you, Steve, because I too have to do work that I don't want to be doing, but I have to pay our bills. So I spend half my time doing the work like Mitty, that my North Star are both my daughter and the animals. Those are my North Stars. I'm doing it for them, but I can only spend about half my time on that, where I really want to be spending all my working time on that. And I've been saying this as long as I've been in Earth Regenerators, I'm still not there. And it's frustrating. It's so frustrating, Steve. So I know how you're feeling. But I'm trying to trust that I'll get there. someday. So I just wanted to say, that there's just so many levels that this webinar resonated with me, both positive and still feeling that yearning at the same time. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Gail. Just one thing to say quickly is that part of chemistry is that there are catalytic processes, or a catalyst is something that accelerates another process but isn't changed itself. Basically, it's like a molecule that can link up to another molecule, change it, but then it remains the same. It's released again so it can do the same thing to another molecule. And so one of the things is that by remaining the same function, like the way the catalyst does, we can gradually change the structural layout of our environments. But if our environments are really rigidly entrenched, then we may find ourselves isolated and unable to continue. So part of this is to seek the nurturing environments for our own ability to be catalysts, which is to draw to us that what is attracted to interact in the ways that we need. But we need to be in an environment that is serving that is feeding that. And so part of it is the length of time it takes through trial and error of trying different things to come upon an environment that's nurturing in ways we couldn't see before, which is why sticking with it is so important. Where the failing is not failing, because the failing would be to stop. And if we didn't stop, we didn't fail. We're just still searching, and it's all good. So there's a lot to that, a lot more we could talk about. That's what I call a pitcher of beer conversation, where it's good to like have the whole night and maybe to dull the pain a little bit by the time you get into the sensitive stuff. Awesome. So I see, is it Glory? Is that how you say your name? Just so that I know, sure I can say your name correctly. And oops, actually I was gonna make you the spotlight. There we go. But hello and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joy. My name is Glory. I'm from Uganda. I'm a refugee by status, and I'm living in a camp of refugee settlement. I'm a refugee. I came to get this channel to Discord, to the account of Seed, and I downloaded the mighty network to connect. And right now, it's my first time to be in this meeting like today. But actually, honestly, what I'm hearing from Joy, I'm like, oh, actually, it blows my mind. And I'm like, this is something that I wanted to thrive my refugee community, to do better, to do the most, to do the best, and to dedicate myself to this. We need something to strive. We need someone to push you so that you can jump into the next level. You need someone to motivate you, to show you that you have to do this. You have to do this. And I personally, in the refugee community, we are implementing regenerative projects to see how we can sustainable the refugee community so that we can transform them to refugee camps, to regenerative camps, whereby they can be able to be the resilient communities and actually make a refugee community a better place to live. That's why I came here to listen to amazing people like this platform here right now. And honestly, Joey, today is my first day to hear you talking. And I'm like, oh gosh, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much. You are really a person that Glory, I need to strive all the refugee community in East Africa, because it touches my heart to hear what you're talking about. And I believe that this is a way to go to make an impact. This is a turnaround to me to hear this from you, Joy. And I'm like, wow, these are the people that I wanted to make so that I can make change in my community. And I'm really glad to everybody here. And I'm pretty much looking forward to hear more, to learn more, to connect more so that we can come together and make a long lasting impact and make a world a better place to live, and without compromising with the future generation. Thank you so much, Joey. Actually inspired me, and thank you.
No, I'm so glad you're here. And one thing that I think is going to be a beautiful space for connection, is you'll find a lot of people in this community, they live in places where they don't feel like they can make the impact on the things they care about. They care about things, the things they care about are getting worse around them, and they know that they need to do things somewhere else. It is a big challenge for a lot of people. And I've found it to be incredible what happens when we recognize that all of us are refugees. In particular ways, like I'm a refugee from genocide from some indigenous ancestors that I don't even remember because I'm described as being European. What does that even mean? I have ancestors from Africa if I go far enough back. So somewhere in history, I had indigenous ancestors, and I've been like excluded from the ability to live in a place and belong. And this is something that happens to people in the way of living in civilizations. So it's a very common situation. A lot of people feel this way. Whereas being a refugee from war or from famine or from drought or disasters is immediate. Whereas what I'm describing was immediate during some war and conquest a long time ago. So it's not immediate to me now. But there are very important ways that we're all the same in this. Just how do we find where to belong? Especially when we can't go back to where we were. Like I don't even know where my tribal ancestors were, so I can't go back to them. So I'm finding my tribal nature in South America, which I've never even been to. My ancestors are not from. So there's surprising ways that this can happen. So I just hope that you'll be able to find very good friends here that are seeking you and your community to be able to participate and be of service, and to find in my book, I have a chapter called The Beating Heart of Africa, which is about the cycles and the rhythms of nature that are there connected to drumming and drum circles, but this way that we need to find our core humanity. And so I'm very glad that you're here to help remind us of how to do this. And I hope that someday we can dance together. So I would love to just invite a moment, if there are no more questions or comments, I'd like to invite a moment where we sort of acknowledge where we are in this learning journey, which is that this is week 7. So we'll have community calls tomorrow and the next day, and then we'll have one more webinar, and then we'll have those community calls, and then this learning journey is over. And what I want to describe right now is that for a learning journey to end is merely that it's like the moon goes from new to full back to new, and the cycle ends. But then there's a new cycle. And it's very important to say that what we're doing right now is we're going deep enough into this exploration, what it means to be prosocial for entire territories, not to be complete, not to finish, like you get your degree and says, check mark, you're certified. That's like so ridiculous. You can see what we're talking about, right? Greg, I see you on the screen, you're laughing, I love it. It's about how do we cultivate a way of relating to the present and the future with each other so that as we continue, it becomes more coherent. And so I think it's really important that the host team suggested that we reverse the order, which means we don't really know what the final topic will be, although sort of know the direction of it. But that today we could look into this field level, the level where you cannot see all the relationships that are weaving together. Like Tanya stopped naming people after a certain point. Like there's this person and this person and this person. Oh wait, and then there are more. Like we can't even name all of them. And some of them I don't even know who they are, even after we've all come together and organized. Because the field, this way of interrelating around shared intention, is so subtle that our purpose isn't to know it, our purpose is to feel it. And as we feel it, we move with it. And as we move with it, we're brought closer together with those who are also moving with it until we discover we found each other. And that's why it feels like a surprise when it happens. That's why Gabriella, kneeling down next to Gabrielle, was a surprise. And so I just wanted to name that one thing you can see in this is that the way of doing design thinking here is very different from a lot of design. It's how you create clear purpose and intention, and then align yourself with it as a way of relating to your own self, so that you move into more harmonious relationships because you feel the dissonance between that inner world and outer world, until you come into alignment with others who have been doing the same thing, which is exactly how Tanya and I found each other in Body Chart. So it's how many of us find each other. And the subtlety of it, the releasing of control. And yet, like Midi said, it's challenging. And like Stephen said, it can be challenging to know how to focus. We have control in how we set our intentions. And that's what we do our most work on. And it has surprising outcomes, very surprising. And so I just want to thank you all for being here and being part of this tapestry. We are all in the process of finding each other right now. And it is not done. And as we keep feeling into it, we'll get better at feeling it. And then we'll be able to guide it with our own intentions, by creating collective intentions, by aligning around personal intent to shared intent. And that's how we move into the prosocial space of being cooperative and co-creative with each other. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to let you know that I can be your other if you need me to be, as can anyone else who is here. So if you feel connection with someone else here, that might be the other person that can help you to bring more life to what's in your heart, speak to them, connect with them, and see what emerges. Because you're coming from a pure intention. You're not coming to take advantage or to exploit or to extract. You're coming from a place of wanting to be in service to love. And that will be felt by the other. And so thank you all for being in this journey, for coming this far, for continuing, for holding the space for this to occur. And I look forward to seeing what surprises await for us together. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in the community calls. So bye for now. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Gracias.
Bye, Joe.
Gracias.